I have a frustration when designing pedal boards in that I would like the signal coming out of the pedal board to be as much as possible exactly the same as the signal plugging straight into the amp. So if everything's bypassed, the sound should not change. Right now, here is the noise level of one of my amps, an Excalibur 15 at gig levels. Set clean, but at gig levels. With the guitar plugged straight in. Let's listen to that. And here's the same noise floor with my Telos running the signal, and this has a buffer. This is buffered. So the only change you're going to hear with this in the line is that however long the cable afterwards, it's going to still sound like if you plugged in with, in this case, a 20-foot guitar cable. This cable still affects the sound. This cable and anything after it doesn't exist for practical purposes. So this is a very clean sound, and I can even increase the gain, and the noise floor doesn't go up. And know what that sounds like on guitar? So there is some increase in background noise when you boost everything up. That's unavoidable, but within the range that you'd actually use it, it's almost negligible. So here's a comparison of the noise floor of the amp with the guitar straight in, running through the Telos with the boost off, and then with the boost. Now I did increase the playback level of all three samples so you can hear the differences, but I increased them all by the same amount, so it is a fair comparison. The problem I'm running into these days, and I'll show it first with this MXR Reverb pedal. Even having this MXR Reverb in line in true bypass mode raises the noise floor. It's not a perfectly quiet bypassed signal. And if I turn the effect on, there's a fairly significant increase in noise floor. Here's without. And that's the noise floor increase in true bypass mode. If I go to trails mode, it makes the pedal a lot more versatile, but there's a noise floor increase at all times. So here's the noise floor without the MXR, with the MXR in true bypass, and with the MXR in trails mode. So if I put this on a pedal board, the output, if they're using it in trails mode, will always be noisier and hissier than without the pedal board. And if they use it in true bypass mode, they lose one of the benefits of the pedal. It's not just the MXR. Let me show you another culprit. So on the right, we have the old version of the Strymon Flint. On the left, we have the client's version 2 Strymon Flint, and they've made some changes, which I'll show you because it's pretty cool. In addition to saying tremolo on and reverb on rather than tremolo bypass and reverb bypass, which never made sense to me, this one has some more functionality. The reverb's a little bit different. The tremolo, I think, has been improved. But even in true bypass mode on these pedals, there is quite a bit of an increase in the noise floor. And if I change them to the trails mode, I think it's this way on this one. Yeah. Then the noise floor goes up even more. If I do it on this one, one of the changes on here might partially address this buffer noise issue. Let me take this one out of the chain real quick. It's still a higher noise floor than straight into the amp, but the noise floor is lower on this. This one has true bypass mode and trails separated. V1, they're interlinked. You can have one or the other. This one is true bypassed or buffered, and trails are separate. Let's turn the buffer on this and see what the difference is. Yeah, with the buffer on, it's noisier all the time. But there's no change when you turn the reverb on. Let's go back to the true bypass mode with trails. It's a fairly subtle difference as far as the background noise, true bypass versus buffered on this pedal. The noise floor always comes up a bit. Just a little bit noisier with the reverb effect on. And this is something I've run into with a lot of the new digital pedals. Now, as far as audio designs go, electronics, I'm an analog guy. So when I did the Telos, that's all analog, and I speak analog. I understand that. I don't understand why so many very highly regarded digital effects these days have such an increase in the noise floor and a hiss. And I don't think it's acceptable to my design criteria, but I'm not a digital designer. That said, there are so many digital things today, from the various Line 6 stuff to plugins and all that. Good quality converters cannot be that expensive these days. It doesn't all have to be analog, Apogee stuff. It seems that both Flints and the MXR and some others I've run into just really aren't that concerned about doing it as well as possible. They're getting a lot of things in here, and they are. Musically, it's a great toolbox to have. Let's set these more or less the same and see how they compare. I do think that the V2, in addition to the nicer typeface and print and not having the little holders for the LEDs, this has some other features that beyond the cosmetic that are nice. Let's do the reverb, 60s reverb on the old one. It's a little over the top. I think they're both pretty much the same. Slight colored variations. Let's go to the 80s. I'm not hearing any real big changes here in terms of what the reverbs sound like. I think they're slightly different, and you may end up at slightly different spots on the two pedals. The changes seem to be all on the tremolo, so that's a cool place. Let's start with the 61 harmonic trim on both. We'll set intensity and speed at noon. So on the old one, sounds quite nice. On the new one, it also goes slower and deeper. So for some of us, that right there alone is worth the price of entry. So that's a nice improvement. Let's see, to be fair to the new Flint, let's take the old Flint out of the signal path and see what the noise floor is like. Not a huge difference. Also, when I do a pedal board, the owner needs to understand that depending on the gear used, sometimes the noise floor will be higher than without using the pedal board. The sound cannot always be identical, and that's a shame. One other difference between these two before I stop. I believe there's a slight popping when this one's engaged. Not really. I was getting it earlier, but I think I was in true bypass mode. Let me verify that. Yeah, on the old one in true bypass mode, there's a click. They're using a relay. It makes a lot of sense to use the trails mode on the old one just to avoid that. I don't think any of the modes got me click on this one. Let's verify that for completion's sake. Yeah, I'm not getting any trails. Any popping on this in trails or true bypass mode. Let's put it back. So, this is what I'm up against. And the reason it's important to know this when you're designing a pedal board is you need to know what noise is beyond your control. If the pedals, when used individually, are all quiet and you have a lot of hiss when you're done, you've made a mistake in your wiring, or there's a problem with the power supply. Sometimes certain pedals don't get along, don't run a buffer before a fuzz or a wah. But this means that no matter how good a job I do on my end, the pedals will always be a little bit noisy. And that bothers me, especially at the price point of the MXR Reverb and the Strymon Flint and some other things that are going on this board. Will the audience notice? Once the hi-hats kick in, no, probably not. In a recording studio, though, an engineer might say, turn all that shit off, we'll do it in post. And maybe they're right for that. It's just problematic that I, with no budget and working, out of my house, could design a buffer that's quiet. And these guys have a lot more money and probably a lot more electronics degrees than I do, and they just don't seem to think that it's important. I'm not singling out Strymon. They're not alone. Strymon, MXR, quite a few others. And it maketh me sad.